In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear or right bank catalytic converter pipe on this Nissan Pathfinder. Let's get started. The rear downstream oxygen sensor is located, well, towards the rear of the engine. You can see it sticking up right there. And for this procedure, I actually won't even unplug it. I'm just going to break it free off of the pipe and tuck it away under there so it can be, well, out of my way. So I'm going to grab my O2 sensor socket, fish it up here. Oh. All right, that broke free. And now I'm gonna use the socket just by hand and unthread the oxygen sensor the rest of the way. There it is, set it aside. Now we need to lower this pipe so that we can actually have space to pull the catalytic converter down. In order to do that, we'll have to disconnect the pipe at both of these flanges. All this hardware is extremely rusty for me. I'm going to use some heat in order to hopefully break it free a little bit easier. So I'm going to use an induction heater. If you have a torch, go ahead and use that. Just apply some heat if yours looks like this so that you can actually have somewhat of a chance of breaking this free. Use a 14mm socket and break this free. All right, looks like the heat really worked for us. This looked extremely rusty, but I got it off and did not break it. And on the other side, there are two more 14mm bolts, or nuts, I guess. And there's one. This one for me is a little bit rounded off, so I'm going to put a 13mm socket on and hammer it. Yeah, there we go. We have separation here. That's perfect. Yeah, I'm not going to go any further. I'm going to put a 15mm socket on these. They are probably supposed to be 14s, but they're a little rusty. Okay, on this one I'm actually going to put a 14 and hammer it on. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they're all supposed to be 14 in size. I'm going to use a little bit of heat to heat up this flange here so the bolt hopefully can break free. Try to heat the flange, not the bolt. You're trying to expand the outer threads, not the bolt itself into the threads. There we go. All right, let's get to this top one. I'm going to try to carve it out basically before I attempt to heat it. I'm going to be careful with this one because that transmission's right there. Don't want to burn a hole through it. There we go. There we go. Let's separate this. There we go, just like that. There we go. And now with the pipe disconnected, I bungee corded it out of the way, pulling this way. You don't want to pull it too much because you will put tension on these flex joints and they can break. If they break, well, you're in for more repairs. At this point, we have to unbolt the lower bracket that holds this part of the catalytic converter pipe onto the engine. As you can see, there's a 14mm bolt right there. We do have to undo that bolt. Okay, tapping a socket on it, I can already tell it's a little bit loose. I don't want to strip it out. I'm going to try and see if a 13 will fit. There we go. Be careful not to hit the oil pan if you do this. You don't want to crack it. Put my ratchet on it and with some leverage, take this out. There we go. There it is. Looking straight up towards the transmission side, right above the axle shaft, you'll see a bolt. That's one of the 4 bolts that we have to remove to get the pipe off of the manifold. Because I have to work through right where I showed you just now, I'm going to give you this view, which is a little bit narrower, but basically stick a long extension up there, a 14mm socket on the end. Now let's take the wheel off so we can gain better access to everything through the fender well. Use a 21mm socket and remove all 5 of your lug nuts so we can remove the wheel. As you can see right here, through the wheel well, we can find the other bolt easily accessible. This is also a 14mm bolt, so let's get this one out as well. It's easily reachable right from underneath. This leaves us with 2 more that we have to get right from the top, so let's take some shields off. This top shield of the manifold is what we're trying to take off next so we can access the 2 rear bolts, and this bolt right here that holds the shield on is one of the 3. They are all 10mm in size. They are often very rusty. You can get this particular one from multiple angles. I'm going to try from underneath. Oh, this is no longer 10mm, so I'm going to have to use an extractor socket. Now we can push this shield away a little bit, and you can see that we gain some space, but not that much. So if you want to attempt it like this, you can, but I'm going to take the top 2 bolts off that hold this shield on so I can really move it out of the way. Otherwise I can't really see what I'm doing, and you may be able to get this outer bolt off, but definitely not the inner. There's another one right on top here. If you sneak your hand with the socket here, and there's that one. All right, let's see what this does for us now. Take this wire out, lift this shield. Oh, that's much better. At this point, we can lift this up. Well, I can. There's a 3rd screw over there, similar to this one here. Mine's broken, so the shield was only held on with 2. I can now gain access to these 2 mounting nuts, so that's perfect. I'm not looking to remove this shield completely. I'm just looking to move it out of the way. Be careful of the O2 sensor wire. You don't want to damage it. If you want to unplug it, just follow it up there. It has a plug right over here, so you can unplug it. Right now, we can get our socket on this and remove it. This is a 14mm nut. There you go. Hold it from the bottom. And take it out from the bottom. And there it is. There's the rear cat. The gasket at the top there came off with the manifold, so what I'm going to do now is just take a wire brush and clean this up. We want to make sure that the new gasket seals up nicely. You don't want any exhaust leaks back there. The overall surface is in good condition. It's just a little dirty and has a little bit of surface rust, so a wire brush will do the trick. This pipe comes with 2 studs that you have to install at the top, and you have to do this before you put it in the vehicle because it'll be very difficult to do this once it's in there. Plus, when these are on, you already have some threads to start a nut on to actually hold this in place. You can grab the end of these studs with some pliers or whatever you might have just to grip them and start them in. You do not have to tighten these a lot. You just have to make them snug basically, because once you put the nut on this side, the nut actually clamps and pulls on both sides of the stud, on the threads basically. So just make these nice and snug, just like that, bottom them out, Then we should be good to go to install this. The surface on the vehicle side is clean. We have a new gasket that we're going to put here, and this is ready to go. Take the new pipe, slide it in, and line it up with the 2 mounting holes on the manifold. Once it lines up, I'm going to start this nut on just so I can make sure it stays in place. There we go. All right, so now it'll stay. I can start on the other mounting nut on the back side. I'm also going to start this one since I have easy access right now. It starts it nicely. Obviously you want to make sure that they all start in without cross-threading. And we're left with one last bolt all the way in this far inner corner. Make sure that threads on smoothly, which it just did. So that's perfect. Now we can tighten these up and torque them if you can in a cross pattern. The reason I say if you can is because I'm pretty sure these 2 rear mounting nuts I will not be able to torque just because I can't get a torque wrench back there. All right, now let's start snugging them in a cross pattern. These 2 rear ones, like I said, I will not be able to torque, so I'm gonna do my best to tighten them up. The torque for all of these is 52 foot-pounds. And I'm gonna go in a cross pattern so that the gasket can squeeze equally and prevent exhaust leaks. That one's 52. I'm going to go back to this one, on which I have my air gun. Give it another couple taps. That should be pretty tight right there. I'm going to go to the other mounting nut in the back, get that one taken care of. That should be tight. And that leaves us with this front bolt over here, which also, once again, 52 foot-pounds. All right, now let's get this shield back on the exhaust manifold. This is going to be a little tricky to line up here. This one lines up. I'm going to try and hold it and start that bolt. I do have a new bolt. I recommend putting new hardware on this because a lot of times it'll rust, and let's just say it doesn't end well if you don't put new hardware. Once you get it started, it should hold the shield. Don't tighten it though, because this shield will still need to move. So you can get the other 2 on up top. Of course, I only have one. My other top one, this one over here, is broken, and there's no way I can get that resecured. Okay, that one's snug. All right, this one's snug as well. Of course, if you had that third one up here in the corner, you would put that one back in. Like I said, this one right here for me is not even existent. Resecure the O2 sensor harness on this clip. It's important that you do this. Hopefully you still have that clip, just so it doesn't get caught. It's sitting right near the axle, right near the hot exhaust. You don't want it to melt, so just resecure it everywhere where it came undone. It does have multiple points, but this is the only one that I took off. Let's get the wheel back on. Put all 5 of your lug nuts on, start them by hand. And then in a cross pattern, you're going to want to torque this to 83 foot-pounds. Double check them. Now let's get this bracket bolt back in. I have to get this in before the pipe, otherwise it'll be a lot more difficult to reach. Start it in. If you need to get a new bolt, get a new bolt. I just cleaned up the threads. And yeah, the head's a little rusty, but it'll be all right. The torque for this is 16 foot-pounds. Now let's get the old gasket off of the pipe. Try to get something in here to pry it off. A little screwdriver usually works. A pick, whatever you have. There we go. All right, now we have to clean this area up. This one is in okay condition, but there is a lot of rust built up here that I want to sand flat. You can use a wire wheel if you want, or whatever works for you. Basically, you need to get a flat surface here, otherwise the new gasket won't seal up and you'll have an exhaust leak. That looks pretty good. I'm just gonna spray it with some brake parts cleaner just to get all the sanding dust off of it. And we'll wait for it to dry, and then we can put the new gasket on. All right, we're ready to put the new gasket on and line up the pipe. Let's get all the studs back together. Let's get all the mounting hardware back in. The converter will come with new hardware on the bottom, and the coarser threaded part, shorter threads, will go on the converter side. The rest of the stud will stick out through the pipe. Okay, start them on by hand. Take some pliers, grab them right on the end here, and snug them up. If you have a stud installer, you can also use that. You don't have to make these very tight. You just have to snug them up, because as soon as they're snug, they're properly seated onto those threads. And as soon as you put this mounting nut on, it actually puts pressure on both sides, so it tightens both ends up. And we'll just do the same to these over here. And of course the third one up top. Now let's get these 3 bolts back in. Start them by hand to make sure they're not cross-threading. These are starting nice and smooth, so that's good. This one at the top will be the most difficult one to reach. Let's snug these up. $25 foot-pounds for all 3 of these, just enough to squish that gasket down. Let's get these mounting nuts on here and snug these up. And torque these to 25 foot-pounds. Now let's get this O2 sensor back in. The way I'm going to do it, because the wire is connected, is I'm going to thread it or unthread it. So spin it backwards a few turns, then I'll let the threads catch. That way the wire is not bound up when it's in position and tightened up. It's also a good idea to put anti-seize on just the threads of the O2 sensor. That way, hopefully next time it will come out much easier. Stick my ratchet in this and give it a quick snug. All right, that's as tight as it needs to be. Let's take this out of here. Wire is perfect.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.